Almost a year into your government, and you are only now publishing your housing plan. Given the amount of time this has taken, we can be forgiven for expecting something bold and new. A plan, as you once said yourself, to once and for all tackle the housing crisis. But unfortunately, this is not the case. Anyone who will take the time to read the plan will know the Emperor has no clothes. In fact, this is not a new housing plan at all. It is nothing more than a reheating and repackaging of the failed housing plan of your last government. Today should have been a moment of hope for all those in need of affordable housing. Instead, it is another punch in the gut for all those without a home of their own. Once again, you are underestimating overall housing need, and as a result, the housing deficit will continue to grow. There is no increased funding or targets for the delivery of social homes. The result will be even longer council waiting lists and ever more adults and children experiencing homelessness. There is no increased funding or targets for the delivery of genuinely affordable homes. Instead, you are brazenly trying to rebrand unaffordable private homes as somehow affordable. There is also no plan to fix your broken affordable housing schemes. This week we learnt that a so-called affordable apartment in O'Devany Gardens in Dublin will cost €500,000. So-called affordable rental homes in the same development are expected to cost €1,900 a month. And this on land once owned by the council and gifted for free to a developer by your government. Your failure on affordable housing will mean that the locked-out generation will continue to be locked out, forced to choose between their parents' box bedroom or emigration. And the only promise that you are keeping in this plan is your promise to attack renters. From March of next year, tens of thousands of renters will face even higher rip-off rents for the privilege of being forced to live in smaller and darker apartments. Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil's housing policy was written by and written for big investors, big developers to benefit their private interest. The needs of ordinary people, workers and families have once again been ignored. And for 10 years, you have starved our councils of the resources and staff to deliver public housing on public land at scale, all the while showering investor funds, corporate landlords and big developers with subsidies and tax breaks like confetti. Today's plan doesn't move a single inch from that disastrous approach. Now, Taoiseach, despite what they're going to say on the radio and television, your backbenchers must be privately reeling. In fact, even your own Minister for Housing, James Brown, isn't hanging around to defend his own plan. Instead of debating with opposition spokespeople on television and radio this evening, he is fleeing the country to speak, would you believe it or not, at a housing conference in England. Taoiseach, it did not have to be this way. You could have taken on board the recommendations of your own Housing Commission. You could have adopted the many solutions promised by Sinn Féin and others. You could have included actual measurable targets year on year for all of your schemes, but why would you bother doing that when you know already that you are going to miss them? But instead, you have decided to do nothing different and nothing new. So, Taoiseach, given your decade of failure, why should anyone believe anything is going to change now?
Thanks very much, Cian Corla, and I certainly think today is a significant day in terms of housing policy in Ireland. But of course, it comes after a number of decisions the government has already taken. This plan today needs to be seen in the context of the National Development Plan published this summer, where we significantly increased the level of investment directly in house building, but we also significantly, listening to people across the country, listening to local authorities, listening to people who build our homes, we also significantly increased the funding for the enabling infrastructure, investing more than 50 billion between water, transport and energy to enable housing supply. The plan also needs to be seen in the context of a piece of work that will conclude at the end of this month that will speed up the delivery of infrastructure, because I think something we can all agree on is we need to accelerate the delivery of infrastructure. There are too many communities in which it's taking too long to deliver vital projects, and we were very clear during the election that fixing this would be a key priority for the government. It's also important to see that, yes, we're living through a housing emergency, and that is the purpose of the plan today, to make real progress and deliver 300,000 more homes during the lifetime of the plan. But it's also important for people watching in at home to know that there are some encouraging signs too. We have seen in the first half of this year completions for new homes at the highest they've been since 2008. We have seen the number of new dwellings completed in the first 3 quarters of this year up 13% on the same period last year. Additional new homes completed this year than the same period last year. We've seen the highest completion figure for apartments for Q1 to Q3 of this year from any time since 2011, when data started to be gathered. Something that is never said in this House from the opposition benches, but we've seen the highest number of first-time buyers draw down their mortgage since 2007. We've seen over 11,000 applications being approved under the Vacant Property Refurbishment Grant. So the scale of challenge in relation to housing and ramping up housing supply is real and is acute. But these are also real statistics that are having a real benefit in the lives of people right across our country. And you say today, as I expected you to say, no matter what was in the plan, you were going to say, I could have said it for you, there is nothing new in the plan. But of course, that's not true either, Deputy O'Brien. There's many new things in this plan, including a €1 billion infrastructure investment fund, helping to de-risk the development of sites in towns and cities to maximise their potential opportunities. There's measures to enable developers to deliver new standalone wastewater treatment plants in rural Ireland, because I've heard right across my constituency and right across this country that there are parts of our country where it hasn't been possible to build any homes because of the inability of a developer to be allowed to deliver a wastewater treatment plant, albeit to an Irish water standard. There's a new fund, which I presume you'll welcome, of €400 million over the next 3 years for small developers. You don't welcome that, I don't think. Well, that's welcome news. And there's an additional, there's €100 million specifically in 2026 to get families out of emergency accommodation, particularly children, and into homes. It's new money of €100 million that hasn't yet been spent in 2026. Don't mislead the people. You will accept it's €100 million for 2026 that has not yet been spent. You'll get your go. That has not yet been spent. That will need to be repeated each and every year, I believe, during the lifetime of this plan. There's a new performance fund to incentivise local authorities to exceed their annual own-build social house targets, because targets aren't the ceiling. They need to go further, they need to drive on, and they need to do more. There's a starter home programme delivering an average of 15,000 affordable homes support per year per family, including many schemes that, quite frankly, you would scrap, because under Sinn Féin, Help to Buy gone, First Home Scheme gone, First Home Owners abandoned, restrictions to the vacant and derelict property grants, abolish the Land Development Agency, despite the fact it's now delivering real homes for real people across our country, and indeed restrictions that you'd put in place that would mean a guard married to a nurse in the 4th year of their job wouldn't be able to access supports under Sinn Féin's so-called affordable home scheme. We had the election, your proposals were rejected, we're getting on with the job.
Deputy O'Brien.
Tánaiste, you've been government for over 10 years, and you have been telling this same story over and over again. 2016, do you remember Simon Coveney's plan? All of the same promises broken. 2021, Darragh O'Brien's plan. Again, all of the same promises and all broken. And today, all we are getting is more of the same. And in fact, none of the things that you have just described as new are new. The €100 million for vacant social housing acquisitions for family that are homeless has existed every year since 2020. In fact, this year you cut the funding for that scheme on last year. The €400 million equity fund has been in place since 2023. Yes, it's going to be extended, but it is not new. The only thing that's new is you are refusing to tell us and the public how many new-built social homes, how many cost rental homes, how many affordable homes will you deliver each year, and how will you make them actually affordable. You failed in 2016, you failed in 2021, and you are failing again today.
I will agree that there is one fundamental difference, certainly, between Sinn Féin and the government when it comes to housing. You want this plan to fail. because you believe you'll do well if our housing plan fails. We intend to work every night and day to build houses, but you thrive off the misery and exploiting the intergenerational anxiety of others. You need this plan to fail so you can exploit the challenges people face. But of course, the government isn't going to fail, because the government has already, you talk about my record in government, we delivered over 137,000 new homes during the lifetime of Housing for All. We will deliver 300,000 homes.
Deputy O'Brien, please allow the Taoiseach to answer.
You won't shut me down, you won't bully me, you won't shut me down, you won't shut me down. Let me speak, please. Let me speak. No, you're shouting me down when it's my time to speak. The people at home actually want to know what we're going to do, and what we're going to do is very clear. We're going to deliver a plan that has a record level of funding, that breaks down silos, that puts a new focus on starter homes, that sets targets for local authorities. And when you tell people there is no targets, that's simply untrue. The target is over 300,000 homes in the lifetime of the plan. And when we had an action plan on jobs, we didn't set an annual target, but we exceeded that target and delivered jobs and got our country back to full employment. We'll exceed the housing target as well. Your plan was rejected, and you want this plan to fail so you can politically thrive.
Deputy Sheehan.
Thank you, Cian Corla. Taoiseach, I do not want this plan to fail. I think, you know, the future of our country, particularly for people my age, depends on it. And at last, this morning, we have a new housing plan. And I have never seen any government take so long to come up with so little. This time last year, you deliberately misled the electorate in terms of the housing targets. And during the election, you never publicised your plans to hike rents, change the rental rules, and to shrink apartment sizes. This new plan tells us that you'll deliver 300,000 homes by 2030. You'll need a minor miracle to deliver 300,000 homes by 2030. You've abandoned targets for the private sector, and it's very clear that you've done this to shield yourself from accountability, because what you cannot count, you cannot measure. And the overall targets for this plan are wrong. They are too low and do not consider inbuilt demand due to the housing deficit. The previous target for over 40,000 homes this year was a fiction. So how is anyone expected to believe you will deliver 300,000 by 2030? The central bank projections are clear that only 36,000 homes will be delivered in 2026 and 40,000 in 2027. That leaves 200,000 homes to be built in the second half of this plan, and that is a doubling of current delivery, with no sense that the private sector can or will do it. And construction activity is falling month on month, and developers are on the go slow because they know they have you on the hook. The target of 12,000 social units is only a 20% increase on current targets, when what is needed is closer to 15,000, as we proposed in our manifesto and as the Housing Commission, which you continue to ignore, stated. And in the section on promoting affordable ownership, there are no new measures, bar prize bonds, to make ownership a reality for people my age. And in fact, you talk about new schemes when what you have done is mainly just a PR exercise of repackaging existing supports or renaming them. And your last plan for affordable homes never delivered on its targets. And your solution is to effectively put all the supports together and rename them. So there is nothing in this plan to say how you will build the tens of thousands of extra affordable homes we need, or how house prices will come down, which they need to. We're told the LDA will have an expanded role, but only 2.5 billion of additional funding has been provided, and there is no clarity around what specific powers it will have. What is needed, Taoiseach, is a massive ramping up of state capacity to directly build social and affordable homes. So I have three questions. Why have you abandoned your annual targets? What is your measure of success for this plan in year one? Will homelessness fall? And what new specific measures are on this plan to make home ownership affordable again? What do you say to any young person, people my age, as the Minister said, do they just have to hang in there for what, another 15, 20 years?
Well, thank you very much. You'll excuse me for firstly extending my deepest sympathy to your colleague, Deputy George Lawler, and the passing of your mum, Betty. And I understand you delivered a very heartwarming tribute to her yesterday, and I join, I know, with members across the House in extending my sympathy to you at this difficult time and to all your family. Thank you very much to Deputy Sheehan for raising the issue. And I accept you don't want the plan to fail, and I accept that generally our engagements are constructive in relation to housing and how we have different perspectives and different views on occasion. But I do appreciate that point. But I do have to reject or disagree with a number of the assertions that you have made. Yes, the state needs to do more in terms of direct building, but there is no way the state is going to build all of the homes that our country requires. I think we can agree on that. So there's a target of delivering 300,000 more homes over the lifetime of the plan. Roughly speaking, from my memory, around 162,000 of those homes will either be social homes, local authority homes, or will be homes that are part funded through a variety of government schemes. That's a very significant proportion. In fact, I'd argue that this country is one of the countries in the European Union that is investing more of the exchequer funding relative to the market than many, in fact most other European countries. But even doing that, I think we'd also agree we're still going to need that private sector to build more homes as well. And that's where you're going to actually get the bulk of delivery. And to do that, we have to open up sites. We have to listen to those who build homes, and we have to listen to the local authorities in terms of the feedback that they're getting as well. And that's why I would reject that there's nothing in this plan that's going to make a material difference. So we're investing hugely in the enabling infrastructure around water and wastewater. We're enabling developers, small developers for small sites, to actually put in their own infrastructure, which will help rural and regional communities right across the country as well. And we are, in relation to the targets, I mean, just to be clear on this, there's a target is very clear, 300,000 more homes over the lifetime of the plan. When we were in government with your party, we had a target for the action plan on jobs at 100,000 new jobs. We didn't break it down every year, and you didn't look for that either. But we exceeded the target. We exceeded the target because we've got to be clear here. You know, this idea of arbitrary deadlines, whether something is finished on the 31st of December or the 1st of January, the idea that somebody can sit back and say, we've done our bit in this county for this year, we'll wait till next year. We need a constant pipeline over the lifetime of this plan, and we need people hungry to do more. And that's why, and Minister Cummins has been clear on this, and Minister Brown, that's why we're actually putting a fund in place to reward and incentivise local authorities who go above and beyond their so-called target in terms of either social homes or starter homes as well. In relation to children and child homelessness, particular, we're taking two very significant steps. One is the fund to help get families out of homelessness, €100 million next year to be ring-fenced. And I'm being clear, that's going to need to be repeated each year. That needs to really ramp up to resource to fund our local authorities in a ring-fenced way to help get children out of homelessness and get a roof over their head. And secondly, and I've heard Focus Ireland and others seek this, changes to the social housing allocation scheme to prioritise homeless children, and that's something also in the plan too.
Sheehan.
Thank you very much, Las Cian Corla. Taoiseach, in your reply, you didn't address any of the specific questions that I asked you. And the fact of the matter is, there are elements in this plan that I welcome. Some of those elements are things that we already proposed, such as amending the law to ensure the best interests of children are taken into account by local authorities when families become homeless. Jan O'Sullivan had that in a bill in 2017. But the fact of the matter is that the state is not doing enough in terms of directly building social and affordable housing. Most of the homes that the LDA delivered in recent years were through turnkey. And yes, the state is investing significant sums into housing, but a lot of this is going into inflationary schemes. And when I talk to local authorities, they do not want financial incentives. They want the department to engage with them properly. They want the department to work with them constructively. They want the department not to stand in their way, because they are very keen to get on with the job of building the homes we need.
I think some are better than others. I don't think it's a uniform thing right across the country, got to be very honest. I have a league table that the Minister for Housing has published, shows some local authorities well exceeding their council targets, social housing targets, including the county of Wicklow that I represent, and others making a paltry contribution. When national targets are missed, they're not missed at a national level. They're missed by local authorities. So I don't believe every local authority is doing everything possible. I don't believe there's this consistent approach that every hospital equally performs, every council equally performs. And that's why you should incentivise good behaviour, good practice, good policy, and good political courage to do more and deliver more in their communities as well. I don't agree with the assertion around the Land Development Agency. I've just come from Donore, a site here in Dublin City where we're delivering with the LDA in partnership with Dublin City Council 1, 2 and 3 beds. And I have to say, and I would ask the Labour Party to reflect on this, we're trying to make changes to apartment standards so we can have flexibility to deliver more accommodation, and one of your elected representatives is going to court. One of your elected representatives has rushed to the courts to try and block those changes to apartment standards. And I'd ask you respectfully, as your party's spokesperson on housing, to pick up the phone to your councillor and say stop weaponising the use of the courts to try and delay changes we need to make to apartment standards, because there will be students in Limerick who need more apartments built, more student accommodation, and the Labour Party councillor is actively delaying that, in my respectful opinion.
Deputy O'Callaghan.
Lascan Corla, firstly on behalf of the Social Democrats, I want to extend our sympathies to Deputy Lawler. Taoiseach, Fine Gael have been in government for nearly 15 years. 15 years of promises, plans and press conferences with ministers donning hard hats. 15 years spent turning the housing crisis into a housing disaster. Under your watch, Taoiseach, house prices have almost doubled, skyrocketing rents have more than doubled, and the number of people who are homeless has increased by more than 400%. This morning, your fourth housing plan was launched. This time, you're told it will be different. How can it? The plan contains the same recipe for failure. There's no sign of the radical policy changes called for by the Housing Commission. Worse, no hope for the locked-out generation that anything will get any better. Taoiseach, the housing crisis is a daily struggle etched into the lives of tens of thousands of people. There's generations of families crammed into overcrowded houses. Entire families are living in box rooms. Toddlers are growing up in homeless accommodation without the physical space to learn how to crawl. And adults are stuck in their childhood bedrooms, putting their lives on hold year after year. The mental toll this is taking is immense. Stress, anxiety and hopelessness are becoming the norm for people who are stuck in this housing limbo. People's lives are being ruined. Taoiseach, in the run-up to the last election, you promised that 40,000 homes would be built last year. This has been exposed as a complete and utter fabrication. So what's the government's response? You've scrapped annual targets from your housing plan. All of a sudden you think these are a bad idea. Well, I've news for you, Taoiseach. The latest desperate attempt to disguise your terrible record in housing will not work. No sleight of hand can hide the mess that Fine Gael governments have made. The fact that annual targets have disappeared from this plan is damning. If you had any confidence in your plan, or indeed in your housing minister, that wouldn't have happened. In fact, the housing minister, who's delayed the launching of this plan for almost a year, isn't even hanging around to debate it this evening. He is running scared. Taoiseach, this plan could have been different, could have been radical. You could have announced plans to build a modular homes factory, to turbocharge the delivery of affordable homes. You could have given the Land Development Agency the power it needs to assemble land banks and deliver homes quickly. You could have fast-tracked a vacant homes tax with teeth to get tens of thousands of vacant homes back into use. Instead, you've reverted to type, sweetheart deals for developers, tax breaks for investment funds, and a doubling down on failure. Taoiseach, given Fine Gael's track record on failure in housing, why should people believe that this plan will be any better than the ones that have come before it?
I always think these phrases like donning hard hats are a bit pejorative. You put on a hard hat when you visit a building site because it's health and safety, it's the law of the land. And of course, government ministers go out and about and meet people who build homes. I'm very proud to do that. Listen directly to the people who build homes, including the Land Development Agency site that I was with at Minister Cummins, Minister Brown and the Taoiseach this morning, where there's over 500 homes being built coming on stream in 2027. And a real partnership between Dublin City Council, a developer and the Land Development Agency, making a real difference. So we're not going to be prisoners to ideology here. We're going to work in every pragmatic way we can to increase the amount of housing. And was a very practical example of that, and always wear a hard hat on a building site. You say on the one level it's the fourth housing plan. Of course the fourth housing plan, because the housing plan needs to be replaced every number of years. It has a deadline. And you also suggest that Fine Gael and Fine Gael alone has written the last four housing plans. I would point out that Fine Gael has been in government during that time with Fianna Fáil, with the Labour Party, with the Green Party, with the Independents. Many political parties in this House have had an opportunity over that period of time to feed their constructive suggestions in to the housing plan. And this is the latest instalment. You on one hand, you've criticised for having a fourth housing plan, on the other hand, you're saying it's delayed. I'm intrigued of your political position, and I genuinely am, in relation to tax. Perhaps it is your view that tax shouldn't be used as a viability measure in relation to housing. And I disagree with it, but it's a legitimate political view to have. Perhaps you believe that when we look at the ledger, we should only use the spending side. We don't in government. We believe we should use the spending side, investing massive amounts of the people's money in building infrastructure, whether it's water, wastewater, electricity, the transport projects that are needed in all of our constituencies to open up sites, and directly into housing, including social housing that's being built at record levels. But we also believe we should use the tax side to reduce the cost of building. And there's been very, very encouraging signs since we've made that change only a number of weeks ago in terms of the reaction of the market. I value the market. The market has an important role to play in terms of delivering and increasing supply. And I'm encouraged by what I've heard from those responsible for building apartments that the decision we took, that we voted for and you voted against, will make a real difference in terms of reducing the cost of building an apartment. Because if we're to reach the 300,000 and exceed the 300,000, we need a lot more apartments built in this country. And I'm also encouraged by the fact that while we have a long way to go, we've seen the highest completion figure for apartments this year so far, Q1 to Q3, than any time since 2011, when my party first came to government in the midst of a financial crisis as well. In relation to targets, let me be very clear. All of the data points will continue to be published. You'll continue to see the quarterly commencement figures, you'll continue to see the completion figures, you'll continue to see the planning permission figures, you'll continue to see the mortgage drawdowns, which, by the way, show that there's more first-time buyers in this country now at any point than there has been since 2007. But just like the approach we took on the action plan for jobs, we're going to provide an opportunity here for a pipeline over the lifetime of the government, and we'll be judged on that. We've been clear in our commitment: 300,000 homes over the lifetime of the plan. That's the target, that's the commitment, and it's not the ceiling.
Dr. O'Callaghan.
Taoiseach, you promised in the last election 40,000 homes. That was a complete and utter fabrication. And now you're making your housing targets, your annual housing targets, disappear because you cannot stand over your record and you don't want accountability on it. Taoiseach, since Fine Gael took office, rents and house prices have soared to record levels. Home ownership levels have collapsed. There's now more than 5,200 children growing up without a home. That's more than the number of people overall that were homeless when Fine Gael took office. At the same time, you've given away billions in tax subsidies to developers, billions with no link to affordability measures. Last year, the CEO of Glenveagh Properties, one of the largest developers in Ireland, saw his salary balloon by 80% to €2.7 million. That's where some of these subsidies are going, to those kind of outrageous levels of remuneration. Taoiseach, why should anyone believe anything you're saying now is going to be different?
So we'll be judged on the delivery of this plan, and Deputy O'Callaghan, I believe it's a good plan. I also believe it's a plan that is only part of the jigsaw. I think the National Development Plan is an equally important part, where we took the decision this summer to very, very significantly increase investment from memory, over 50 billion extra for the enabling infrastructure, transport, water, wastewater and energy. And that's going to be key. The next instalment will be at the end of this month, where Jack Chambers will bring forward proposals to accelerate infrastructure delivery. I hope you'll support the proposals that will require, I think, having emergency powers to deliver critical infrastructure more quickly. There's too much running to the courts happening in this country. In my view, people have a right to access the courts. It's not a natural extension of the planning process. There is a thing called the common good, the public good, and we do need to deliver infrastructure much more quickly, and I look forward to debating those points. And the Minister for Housing is attending an event. He look forward to debating you, because he looks forward to hearing how you guys are actually going to build all this stuff, because it's very easy, you come in here and you say you're against everything. You see, what do you think I am, a secretary? I don't know where the minister's going. The minister. I've missed your interruption, so you were very quiet. I was wondering why you were so quiet. I suppose it's perhaps been a tough day at the Sinn Féin office. But anyway, you were a bit quiet. You were a bit quieter at the heckling today. Order. Pardon me? You're not getting enough training from my mates to debate people. I don't know who trains you, but you want to get well trained before the next debate in housing.
Deputy Toibin.
So this government is a record-breaking government for all the wrong reasons. Record rents, record house prices and record numbers of people who are homeless. The average residential property sold in 2025 is €426,000. I couldn't believe the figure when I saw it. 8 times the actual average income at the moment. The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment is now over £2,000 a month, and the availability of homes to rent has halved since pre-COVID times. 16,600 people are currently languishing homeless. 5,200 of those are children. And 402 people have died in homelessness in Dublin in 5 years. And for much of the rest of the country, that figure is not even measured. The truth is, in terms of housing, your government is going into reverse. Only 30,000 homes were built last year. That was a decrease from the year before, well short of the target. Planning permissions are falling. Planning permissions for apartments have collapsed. Last year you said that you're going to build 12,930 social homes. You missed that target by 2,300. The key problems are not being tackled, and the key problems, I believe, are government bureaucracy and red tape, the lack of viability, the lack of key infrastructure, and the lack of serviced zoned land. Now, one of the big shocks, I think, in this situation is, in the middle of a housing crisis, so many construction companies are idle. So many construction companies are currently putting their staff abroad because they cannot work here. They're saying that there's no proper pipeline of work coming through for them to work on, which is absolutely incredible. Now, the planning situation in this country is absolutely mental. It's completely crazy. I've heard of a 30,000-page planning permission needed for a particular project that needed vans to transport it. Another planning permission needed 4 separate versions of the same plan to suit 4 separate agencies. The Greater Dublin Drainage Project, a project to help service 100,000 homes, has been in planning for the last 10 years and is now in judicial review again and likely to be tied up for many other years. In Ireland, there's actually 26 judicial reviews per 1 million people. In Britain, it's 5 per 1 million people. Judicial reviews are becoming a national sport in this country. The issuing of permits and licensing in this country under your government is the slowest in Europe. The tendering process under your government is one of the slowest in Europe at the moment. And this hasn't evolved out of thin air. This has been created by your government. And the lack of infrastructure is hammering the building of homes. Eoin was in before the Infrastructure Committee there recently, and I asked him, how long is it going to take for you to fill the gaps that are currently a blockage in the building of homes? And they said proudly that they'll have it done by 2050. That's an incredible situation. Eoin can hardly keep the water in the taps in County Meath at the moment of the houses that are built, and yet thousands of homes are waiting to be built in my county at the moment. There's a lack of electricity, water, roads, and it's all your responsibility. And to be honest, I have a different view from the other opposition parties here. But in this particular plan that you have, it's a tweaker's charter. It's a little bit here, a little bit there, a grant here and a grant there. It does not have the ambition that's needed to fix this problem. When will you deliver the radical change that's needed?
Well, thanks very much, Deputy Toibin. As is often the case, I agree with you on some things and disagree with you on others. So let me try to take through that. Yes, rents are very high in this country, and they're too high, and that's why we've taken a number of measures to try and increase supply. Because I do believe when you increase supply, that there's a demand and supply effect when it comes to housing. I also, though, believe that you need to do other things in the here and now. That's why we've taken the decision, and we took it in the budget, to extend the rent tax credit for the next number of years. It's also why we rolled out the rent pressure zone nationwide. When this government came to office in January, there were parts of this country not covered by the rent pressure zone. Donegal comes to mind. We fixed that as well. I don't think many people thought this government was going to do that. That was a decision that we took. You reference a variety of statistics. I'm not disputing them, but of course, lies and statistics. You pick some areas of challenge in relation to statistics. You reference planning permissions and the likes. I can also reference the fact that we are seeing completions up, and that we did see a huge amount of commencements happen when we made the changes in relation to development levies. Our job now is to work with industry to make sure that they're converted into actual homes for people to live in. We are seeing first-time buyers up as well. You'll accept that as a statement of fact. Yes, the cost of a home is very expensive, but we have seen the highest number of first-time buyers this year since any time since 2007. I agree with you in relation to the planning issue. Again, I'd point to some reforms that we've brought in that are bearing fruit. So if we were having a debate in this House not that long ago, we would have been talking about huge backlogs in on Bord Planola, as it was then. I think we're seeing real progress with Commission Planola, real progress in decision times, real progress in reduction of wait times. I'm hearing that, you must be hearing that. I'm not saying it's there, but it's much, much better. It's much, much better than it was. And we will need to, and I'm putting this House very clearly on notice, that this government will intend to bring forward legislation in terms of the delivery of critical infrastructure in an emergency manner. Now, we've done that before. I want to remind people at home. We did it in relation to Brexit for port infrastructure. We did it, I think, at Rosslare. I think we did it at Dublin Port. And we certainly did it also for temporary gas storage. It can be done, and we do need to do it. Not everything can be critical infrastructure, but there's certainly major projects, the likes of which you referenced, that clearly are. We will have proposals to government before the end of the year. We'll have proposals to leaders by the end of this month as well, because we do need to make sure that there's projects that are of national significance, that there's a common good, that we need to speed up the delivery. I have very significant concerns about the use of judicial reviews and environmental law in relation to, environmental law being used to actually slow down the delivery of wastewater treatment plants. I can't understand that in my head. Wastewater treatment plants improve our environment. So I think both Europe and Ireland, there's an over-regulation now. We need to make sure there's not a brass plating or a gold plating of regulation in this country, and we need to make sure people can't have an each-way bet with a judicial review as well. And you can expect changes from government in relation to that. On Uisce Éireann, I think Uisce Éireann have made progress. They ran a very successful public relations campaign looking for very significant additional funding. I've said this directly to them. We provided that funding. We provided it on the proviso that there'd be a linkage between that funding and housing supply. But also, Uisce Éireann can't just be the answer to everything. Uisce Éireann has to empower developers for small or reasonably small developments in rural and regional Ireland to be allowed to put in the infrastructure once it's to the Uisce Éireann standard. That's now been agreed, and that will be in place by February.
Deputy Toibin.
It is quite incredible that if a farmer is building a slatted shed in Cavan, that a person in Cork can put in an objection in relation to it, and we have a bill that would bring that to an end. The issue of serviced land and zoned land is a massive issue as well that's been ignored, I believe, over the last while. And the government talks about an audit of that serviced land in this. Isn't it quite incredible? Now, you have to say this is startling, that the government does not know how much zoned land there is in the country and how much serviced zoned land that exists in this state at the moment. And that actually the minister is saying there's not enough, and yet we have people at the head of county councils and local authorities saying that they have enough. It is outstanding that we have a housing crisis for 15 years and there's no agreement as to where this zoned land is. And there's actually serviced land that's not zoned residential. That's the low-hanging fruit in terms of building houses quickly, and yet the government still does not know what that's in. Just in terms of taxes, it is incredible. €3 billion worth of VAT was taken in terms of the construction of houses last year. €3 billion. The price of a normal house at the moment, €50,000 of it, is actually VAT and other service charges. You reduced VAT in terms of the issue of apartments. Why did you not do it in terms of houses? There is a viability crisis happening at the moment, and we have to make those houses viable.
Thank you, Deputy.
Why is it the state that so many builders are sitting at home, sitting on their hands, not able to build in the middle of a housing crisis?
I'm only smiling because you're the first voice from the opposition that has actually suggested. No, and I really appreciate that, because this united opposition thing gets presented a lot, but there are different voices in the opposition too, and there are different perspectives too. But you are the first member of the opposition who's critiqued the government for not going further with our VAT reduction measure. The rest of them have slated us for doing anything at all in relation to it too. So that is a point of difference. And when you're in government, you're trying to get these balances correct. We made a decision that the acute viability issue was around apartments. We also had to make a balanced decision in relation to the composition of the overall package in terms of what was available in relation to tax, and we continue obviously to monitor that. But we are encouraged by what we're seeing in relation to what the industry is saying, and I don't mean saying to government, said to the Oireachtas Housing Committee in recent weeks as well. On the issue of service and zoned land, the residential zoned land tax, which hasn't been without challenge, farmers and others, and we're working our way through those issues, as Mr Hayden knows, but we have seen a very significant increase in transactions. In other words, people not sitting on residential zone land. I think that is an encouraging sign. And Minister Cummins with Minister Brown has issued now this Section 28, which is basically to instruct our councils to zone enough land for at least 83,000 houses, because this shouldn't be rocket science. You have to over-zone, because not every zone site converts, obviously, into homes. It took a little bit too long for some local authorities to get that point. That's why the Taoiseach, myself, Minister Cummins and Minister Brown are meeting with each of the local authorities' chief executives in small groups. We've done 4 so far.
Now, understanding are the 38A.